The day Karen called 911 on my 10 emotional support chickens, I knew the HOA war had officially begun. I stood frozen on my front porch as the police cruiser rolled slowly down the quiet suburban street. My heart pounded hard against my ribs, but I forced my face to stay calm and collected. I am Jacob, just a regular guy who moved to Willow Creek Estates for some much-needed peace. After burning out in a brutal city tech job, I craved wide lawns and friendly waves. The neighborhood looked perfect with its white fences and perfectly trimmed hedges everywhere. But the HOA rules hit me like a brick wall the moment I signed the closing papers. Exotic pets were banned outright, no exceptions listed in the thick covenant booklet. My anxiety had been creeping back worse than ever after a messy breakup and layoffs. My doctor recommended an emotional support animal that could fit my low-key lifestyle perfectly. Dogs felt too hyper and cats triggered my allergies in the worst way possible. Chickens, on the other hand, were calm, therapeutic, and they even supplied fresh eggs daily. I did months of research and registered all 10 as official support fowls with legal paperwork. The Fair Housing Act protected them, so I felt completely safe bringing the fluffy crew home. Their gentle clucking soothed my nerves better than any pill ever could on stressful mornings. The backyard coop I built myself stayed spotless with fresh bedding and proper ventilation. I never expected a few backyard birds to turn the whole neighborhood against me overnight. The first violation notice arrived in my mailbox on a crisp Tuesday afternoon. Karen signed it personally as HOA president, claiming my chickens counted as banned exotic pets. I read the letter twice and actually laughed out loud at the sheer ridiculousness of it. I replied the same day, attaching every legal document and explaining the federal protections clearly. Karen did not reply by email. She showed up at my door the very next evening instead. Her pearl necklace gleamed under the porch light while her voice dripped fake neighborly concern. "These birds are turning our lovely street into a filthy barnyard, and I will not allow it," she snapped. I took a slow breath and answered with a polite smile that these were protected support fowls. She huffed loudly, spun on her heel, and marched away with her heels stabbing the sidewalk. That was only the beginning of her campaign to make my life miserable in every possible way. Rumors started flying through the community email list and the private neighborhood app next. People whispered that I was secretly running an illegal urban farm right in their backyards. Some neighbors stopped waving when I walked my dog and gave me cold sideways glances instead. The air at the block party felt thick with tension. I could almost taste the judgment. I kept my yard immaculate, but the smell of fresh grass now mixed with quiet dread for me. Then Karen called code enforcement without warning one bright Saturday morning. The inspector arrived while I was drinking coffee on the deck watching the chickens peck happily. He walked around the coop, took notes, and finally shrugged, saying everything looked compliant to him. Karen stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, insisting he had missed the obvious violations. When he left without issuing a ticket, her face turned an ugly shade of beet red. She began taping passive-aggressive notes to my front door about imaginary odors and noise. I saved every single one in a folder that grew thicker with each passing week. My phone started recording every call, and I forwarded every nasty email to my lawyer quietly. The situation kept getting darker as she dragged the entire HOA board into her personal vendetta. She claimed in the monthly newsletter that my support fowls were destroying property values overnight. Friends I used to barbecue with now crossed the street to avoid conversation with me. I felt the isolation settle heavy on my shoulders, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. One humid evening she pounded on my door again, her face flushed with pure self-righteous fury. "The police are on their way, Jacob, because this public nuisance has gone on long enough," she yelled. I heard the sirens wailing closer, and my stomach twisted into a cold knot of disbelief. The officer stepped out of his car looking already tired of whatever drama he was walking into. Karen launched into a dramatic rant about illegal exotic animals threatening the whole community. I handed him my full folder of registration papers and explained the federal housing protections calmly. The cop flipped through the documents, then told her this was a civil matter, not a crime. But Karen kept screaming that they should seize the chickens right there on my lawn. She actually lunged forward, trying to grab one of the birds as proof of her point. The chicken flapped away in panic, leaving a trail of soft white feathers floating in the breeze. I bit my tongue hard to keep from laughing at how completely absurd the whole scene had become. After the police drove away empty-handed, Karen shifted into full scorched earth mode immediately. She printed flyers and stuffed them into every mailbox, calling my setup a health hazard to children. The cheap ink smelled like desperation when I pulled one off my windshield the next morning. Neighbors started complaining about fake nighttime noise that my quiet chickens never actually made. I lay awake some nights listening to the distant hum of lawnmowers and my own racing thoughts. Enough was enough, so I finally consulted a lawyer who specialized in HOA and fair housing cases. He reviewed everything and confirmed my support fowls were bulletproof under federal law. He also spotted several places where Karen had clearly violated the HOA bylaws herself. I began preparing for the inevitable board meeting like it was the final boss battle. The night arrived and the community center filled with curious residents buzzing with gossip. Karen sat at the head table wearing her power suit and that same smug smirk she always had. She presented her case, first painting me as a reckless rebel bent on ruining the neighborhood. Her voice dripped with exaggerated sarcasm while she called my chickens an exotic pet circus. When my turn came, I stood up and laid out the evidence slowly and methodically. I played the recorded phone calls where she threatened to make my life hell until I surrendered. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their folding chairs as her own words filled the room. Karen's face drained of color when I read aloud the email where she admitted ignoring federal law. She had written that the HOA should just fine me extra without a proper vote, which broke their own rules. The room went dead silent while I dropped the final stack of printed proof on the table. My lawyer had already drafted a formal complaint to the State Oversight Board about her misconduct. The new president called for an immediate vote and the board removed Karen on the spot. Her protests echoed uselessly as the other members turned their backs in visible embarrassment. She stormed out of the meeting muttering curses under her breath. Her tiny empire finally collapsed. The replacement board apologized to me personally and promised to update the pet policy for clarity. News traveled fast through the neighborhood and people started smiling and waving at me again. A few neighbors even asked for advice on getting their own emotional support animals after seeing mine. I walked home that night feeling a heavy weight lift off my shoulders with every step. Sitting on my porch swing, I watched the 10 chickens scratch peacefully in the soft evening light. The cool breeze carried their soft, contented clucks across the quiet suburban street. It felt deeply ironic that a handful of backyard birds had toppled the neighborhood's biggest bully. Karen's kingdom of petty control had crumbled completely over something as harmless as support fowls. The whole suburb finally breathed easier without her constant meddling and manufactured drama. I smiled to myself while sipping a fresh cup of coffee, thinking justice sometimes arrives with eggs. The experience reminded me that small tyrants always overreach when no one pushes back. And in the end, the calm guy with paperwork and patience wins the war every single time.